Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered together again. This is the third Sabbath of the last month, the 6th month of summer, either the 21st of that month or the 20th, depending on your reckoning. And we are continuing in our study of Irenaeus Against Heresies. We went through a little bit of what was in the first book. We're skipping through most of that because it's really talking about the errant opinions and the wrong beliefs of the heretical sects that grew up after the coming of our Mashiach. So we don't want to get too much into what they held to and all the things and errant opinions they had. We'd rather see what was established for our benefit and correction of those things, which is why we're skipping ahead. This is from book 2. Let me back up. This is book 2, the introduction or the preface of this section. It says, in the first book, which immediately precedes this, exposing knowledge falsely so called, which was the refutation of knowledge falsely so called, is the original title of Against Heresies. Scholars later named it Against Heresies. But this is an allusion to 1 Timothy 6:20. He continues, I showed you my dear friend, or my very dear friend, usually says my beloved, that the whole system is devised in many opposite ways by those who are of the school of Valentinius, was false and baseless. I also set forth the tenets of their predecessors, proving that they not only differed among themselves, but had long previously swerved from the truth itself. And one peculiar thing about error is it's not the truth. It's not founded on what doesn't change. So when you see adjustments or flip-flopping or divergent opinions that are not in agreement and yet they still go together, that's a sign of the adversary's influence and not the truth, who is steadfast, unchanging, and of one accord. Everyone that's of him is of one mind, as with the Mashiach as our head. Right, so that's the great goal that we all have here. He says, I further explained with all diligence the doctrine as well as practice of Marcus the magician, since he too belongs to these persons. And I carefully noticed the passages which they garbled from the scriptures, with the view of adapting them to their own fictions. Moreover, I minutely narrated the manner in which, by means of numbers and by the 24 letters of the alphabet, they boldly endeavor to establish what they regard as truth. So, meaning the Greek alphabet, right? And that's talking about how they use gematria and secret code with their letters, right? They take the literal meanings of the words like Sophia and they come up with errant opinions about who that is and what it represents, when those opinions are not derived from what he said. And that's the biggest issue. They take it from other places. I have also related how they think and teach that creation at large was formed after the image of their invisible pleroma, which is the invisible place where the mighty ones dwell in all their fullness. It's not the creation itself, but it's a separate place outside of creation. We'd call it maybe an extra dimension or an alternate dimension. What our Creator said is the Shamayim is above us. Moving on. And what they hold respecting the demiurge or the demiurge, declaring at the same time the doctrine of Simon Magus of Samaria, their progenitor, and of all those who succeeded him. I mentioned too the multitude of those Gnostics who were sprung from him, and noticed the points of difference between them, their several doctrines, and the order of their succession, while I set forth all those heresies which have been originated by them. I showed, moreover, that all these heretics, taking their rise from Shimon or Simon, have introduced impious and irreligious doctrines into this existence or life. And I explained the nature of their redemption and their method of initiating those who are rendered perfect, along with their invocations and their mysteries. If you're familiar with invocations from the Antichrist for Dummies series, the Invocatia was a pagan or witchcraft ritual that Rome at least did. It was officiated by their priest or high priest, which was the Caesars of Rome. And it's literally to invoke their false mighty ones to do different things. The Invocatia specifically is to invoke the aid of the mighty one of the enemy they're trying to conquer and to entice them to their own worship, which is what you see happen. He used this invocation ritual. They went through and did what they did. And then over the course of time, they adopted and took on the belief or worship of that creator, although in a perverted form, which is exactly what's mentioned in the book of Gad the Seer, chapter 2, as well as other places as the mistress of harlots, if you can recall. And this was in history, the mystery religions of Babylon that was adopted by paganized Hebrews and carried through from Babylon to Turkey, from Turkey to Rome, and spread throughout the world. All right. It says, I proved also that there is one Elohim, the creator, and that he is not the fruit of any defect, nor is there anything either above him or after him, because he is the first and the last and the most high. In the present book, I shall establish those points which fit with my design, or which fit in with my design, so far as time permits, and overthrow by means of lengthened treatment under distinct heads their whole system. For which reason, since it is an exposure and subversion of their opinions, I have so entitled the composition of this work. For it is fitting, by a plain revelation and overthrow of their conjunctions, to put an end to these hidden alliances, and to Bithus himself, and those to obtain, and thus to obtain a demonstration that he never existed at any previous time, nor now has any existence. And moving on to chapter 1. It says, there is but one Elohim, the impossibility of it being otherwise. And this is a theme that you can find all throughout the common scriptures. Elohim is one, and beside him or apart from him, there is no deliverer, there is no other Elohim, there is no power and strength, there is no refuge, there is no savior or deliverer. I think I already mentioned that one. But the point was, our Mashiach himself says that this is eternal life, to know you, the only true Elohim, speaking of our Abba above, in which there's no change, no shadow of turning. He dwells in unapproachable light that's inaccessible to all men, and not even messengers can perceive his face. It's only our Mashiach alone. He has no change in him. There's nothing that's different. He's ever continuing as he was and is and will be. He's the only true Elohim. And then Yahushua Mashiach is Elohim through him, given all the power and authority by him, and will submit to him when all things are subjected and under his feet, as it's written. But we'll go over a few places where it talks about this in detail after we read this chapter. So section 1, it says, it is proper then that I should begin with the first and most important head, that is Elohim the creator, who made the Shemayim and the earth and all things that are therein, whom these men blasphemously style the fruit of a defect, and to demonstrate that there is nothing either above him or after him, nor that influenced by any one, but of his own free will, he created all things, since he is the only Elohim, the only Yahuwah, the only creator. Now, the only one who is he who causes all things to be, right? That's what the literal meaning of his name is. And Yahushua, because of his obedience and his being the only brought forth of the Father, he inherited the name of above every name. So the only creator, the only Abba or Father, alone containing all things and himself commanding all things into existence. Another translation says he alone comprehending all things, himself comprehended by nothing. Or it says himself containing all things and nothing containing him. This is actually a quote or a copy of what we can find on Irenaeus Against Heresies. Or I'm sorry, the Shepard of Hermas, right here, the Shepard of Hermas under book 2, called the commands. And that's actually the first command. So I'll let you see it right here, of believing in one Elohim. It says, first of all, believe that there is one Elohim who created and framed all things of nothing into a being. He comprehends all things and is only immense, or is only without limit, not to be comprehended by any, who can neither be defined by any words nor conceived by the mind. Therefore, believe in him and fear him, and fearing him, abstain from all evil. Keep these things and cast all lust and iniquity far from you, and put on righteousness, that thou shalt live or exist to Elohim, if thou shalt keep this commandment. All right, there's a few other places that we'll cover as well, but we'll get back to that. This is section 2. It says, for how can there be any other fullness or principle or power or Elohim above him, since it is a matter of necessity that Elohim, the pleroma or fullness of all these, should contain all things in immensity, or in his immensity, and should be contained by no one. So you see, he's going off of what we just read there as well. But if there is anything beyond him, he is not then the pleroma or fullness of all, nor does he contain all. For that which they declare to be beyond him will be wanting to the pleroma or fullness, or in other words, to that Elohim who is above all things. But that which is wanting and falls in any way short is not the fullness of all things. Meaning, if there's any constraints, there's not limitlessness, and he is without limit. In such a case, he would have both beginning, middle, and end with respect to those who are beyond him. And if he has an end in regard to those things which are below, he has also a beginning with respect to those things which are above. In like manner, there is an absolute necessity that he should experience the very same thing that all, or at all other points, and should be held in, bounded, and enclosed by those existences that are outside of him. For that being who is the end downwards necessarily circumscribes and surrounds him who finds his end in it. And thus, according to them, the Abba or Father of all, that is, he whom they call Parun or Proarchi, with their pleroma or fullness, and the Tob, mighty one of Marcion, is established and enclosed in some other, and is surrounded from without by another mighty being, who must of necessity be greater, inasmuch as that which contains is greater than that which is contained. But then that which is greater is also, and in a greater degree, Yahuwah or Master. Sorry, I messed that up. But then that which is greater is also stronger, and in a degree or a greater degree, master. And that which is greater and stronger and in a greater degree, master, must be Elohim. Section 3. Now, since there exists, according to them, also something else which they declare to be outside the pleroma, or fullness, into which they further hold there descended that higher power who went astray, it is in every way necessary that the pleroma either contains that which is beyond, yet is contained, for otherwise it will not be beyond the pleroma or fullness. For if there is anything beyond the fullness, there will be a fullness within this very fullness, which they declare to be outside of the fullness, and the fullness will be contained by that which is beyond. And with the fullness is comprehended also the first Elohim. So that might sound confusing or a little weird, but that's the essential doctrine they're putting, that there's two infinites that coexist, which is not possible. There's also other absurdities that they hold to, and this is what he's refuting right now. Or again, they must be an infinite distance separated from each other, the pleroma, I mean, and that which is beyond it. But if they maintain this, there will then be a third kind of existence which separates by immensity, the fullness, and that which is beyond it. This third kind of existence will therefore bound and contain both the others, and will be greater both than the pleroma or fullness, and than that which is beyond it, inasmuch as it contains both in its bosom. In this way, talk might go on forever concerning those things which are contained and those which contain. For if this third existence has its beginning above and its end beneath, there is an absolute necessity that it be also bounded on the sides, either beginning or ceasing at certain other points where new existence began. These again, and others which are above and below, will have their beginnings at certain other points, and so on ad infinitum, so that their thoughts would never rest in one Elohim, but in consequence of seeking after more than exists, would wander away to that which has no existence and depart from the true Elohim. Section 4 says, these remarks are in like manner applicable against the followers of Marcion. For his two Elohim, or mighty ones, will also be contained and circumscribed by an immense interval which separates them from one another. But then there is a necessity to suppose a multitude of mighty ones separated by an immense distance from each other on every side, beginning with one another and ending in one another. Thus, by that very process of reasoning on which they depend for teaching that there is a certain pleroma or fullness or mighty one above the creator of Shamayim and Eretz, or the Shamayim and earth, anyone who chooses to employ it may maintain that there is another fullness above the fullness, above that again another, and above Bithis another ocean of mighty ones, while in like manner the same successions hold with respect to the sides, and thus their doctrine flowing out into immensity, there will always be a necessity to conceive of other fullness and other Bithai, so as never at any time to stop, but always to continue seeking for others besides those already mentioned. Moreover, it will be uncertain whether these which can, Moreover, it will be uncertain whether these which we conceive of are below, or are in fact themselves the things which are above. And in like manner, it will be doubtful respecting those things which are said by them to be above, whether they are really above or below. And thus our opinions will have no fixed conclusion or certainty, but will of necessity wander forth after worlds without limits and mighty ones that cannot be numbered. And if you are familiar with the heliocentric model at all, this is exactly what happens when you believe in that kind of thing. You don't know if up is down or left or right. All these things are confusing in the very same capacity and for the same purpose, because it's not the truth, and it keeps you, instead of believing what truth and reason dictate, what his word says and what your senses can confirm, we believe whatever we're told by whatever authority we hold to, because you don't have anything else to cling to that's real. It's rather interesting here. But it's almost as if he was foretelling these things. And thus our opinions will have no fixed conclusion or certainty, but will of necessity wander forth after worlds without limits and mighty ones that cannot be numbered. Section 5. These things then, being so, each mighty one will be contented with his own possessions, and will not be moved with any curiosity respecting the affairs of others. Otherwise, he would be unrighteous or unjust and rapacious, and would cease to be what Elohim is. Each creation, too, will esteem its own maker, and will be contented with him, not knowing any other. Otherwise, it would most righteously be deemed an apostate by all the others, and would receive a richly deserved punishment. For it must be either that there is one being who contains all things, and formed in his own territory all those things which have been created according to his own will, or again, that there are numerous unlimited creators and mighty ones who begin from each other and end in each other on every side. And it will then be necessary to allow that all the rest are contained from without by someone who is greater, and that they are each of them shut up within their own territory and remain in it. No one of them all, therefore, is Elohim, for there will be wanting to every one of them, possessing only a very small part when compared with all the rest. The name of the omnipotent will thus be brought to an end. Omnipotent means all-powerful, right? And such an opinion will of necessity fall to impiety. This is a section from, I believe it's book 8 or book 10. I'd have to check, from the from the Recognitions of Clement, which is really the teaching and preaching of Kepha and then his taught ones. He had a group of 12 he went out preaching, refuting Simon the magician as they were going along, making their way towards Rome. And in the process of doing that, he was also teaching men how to be evangelists or preachers of the truth. And after that, he sent them out. He listened to them teach as well. And this is actually a section where Niceta, who's a brother of Clement, and his twin is Aquila. Their names were Fastus and Fastinius originally. And the story about what happened to them is all in the Recognitions of Clement. But this is at a point now where he is instructing, or he's giving examples of things in front of Kepha. And this is stuff that Kepha would have been taught. Sister Pearl said when Kepha, the 12 would be the original taught ones. Yes, our Mashiach was the one in whom Moshe said, there's one coming like me from among your brothers, him you shall listen to. And anyone that won't listen to him shall be cut off from among his people. And then our Mashiach said to his 12 and then the 70 that he sent out, that if anyone won't listen to you, any city or town or people, you dust off their feet when you leave, and you say it'll be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the yom of arbitration, or the day of judgment, than it will be for that house, city, or nation. So he gave the order of importance for listening. And then if you recall, in the apostolic constitutions, you get the list of the overseers that were anointed and were set up by the emissaries. And it was enjoined that anyone who doesn't listen to them, that same thing is going to happen, because then you reject the message of the taught ones, which is rejecting our Mashiach, which is rejecting our Father above. But right here, this is from Kepha, or from Kepha's taught one Nesita, and this is on simple and compound. Then Nesita began as follows. Everything that is either simple or compound. That which is simple is without number, division, color, difference, roughness, smoothness, weight, lightness, quality, quantity, and therefore without end. But that which is compounded is either compounded, or that which is compound is either compounded of 2 or of 3 or even of 4 elements, or at all events of several. And things that are compounded can also of necessity be divided. And that's a simple explanation between what is without limit, the infinite one, and what has limits. All right, so to continue, it says, the old man, this is, they're actually their father, but they didn't know at the time. The old man, hearing this, said, you speak most excellently and learnedly, my son. Then Nesita went on, therefore, that which is simple and which is without any of those things by which that which subsists can be dissolved is without doubt incomprehensible and infinite, knowing neither beginning nor end, and therefore is one and alone, and subsisting without an author. But that which is compound is subject to number, to diversity and division, are necessarily compounded by some author, and is a diversity collected into one species. That which is infinite is therefore, in respect of goodness or tobim, a father, in respect of power, a creator. Neither can the power of creating cease in the infinite, nor the tobim or goodness be quiescent or quiet, silent. But he is impelled by goodness to change existing things and by power to arrange and strengthen them. Therefore, some things, as we have said, are changed and composed of 2 or 3, some of 4, others of more elements. But since our inquiry at present is concerning the method of the world and its substance, which it is agreed is compounded of 4 elements, to which all those 10 differences belong, which we have mentioned above, let us begin at these lower steps and come to the higher, for a way is afforded to us to intellectual and invisible things from those that we see and handle. And in just a moment, we're going to go over where he learned this from Kepha himself. So, as is contained in arithmetical instructions, where, when inquiry is made concerning L-breathed things, we rise from the lower to the higher numbers. But when the method of respecting present and visible things is expounded, the order is directed from the higher to the lower numbers. Is it not so? And that's just to say, when we're talking about things from above, we have to start with what we can see and hear and taste, touch, and sense. It's our Mashiach had said, if you do not believe what I spoke or say concerning the things of the earth or the earthly things, how can you comprehend when I speak of the Ruachni or spiritual things? And in the very same method, you'll see Kepha explain that you have to believe what he said in regard to creation before you can comprehend what the things that are without limit or beyond what we can perceive with our mind. So I think that will be good for this section, and we'll move on just one moment. All right, this is another section. I believe it's from book 3. possibly from book 2 of the Recognitions of Clement, and this is during the 3 Yamim, or the 3 days in which Shimon Kepha, and Simon the magician were discoursing in Caesarea Stratanos, or Caesarea Station, as they call it. And this is the end of one chapter. I'm just going to read the question that Simon the magician poses. It says, "Then said Shimon, let pass for the present what I have said, and tell us what you suppose to be above the skies," speaking of the firmament. "Then the Torah teaches immensity." Then said Kepha, "If you believed concerning the true fountain of light, which is our Mashiach, I could instruct you what and of what sort is that which is immense, and should render not a vain fancy, but a consistent and necessary account of the truth, and should make use not of sophistical assertions, but testimonies of Torah and nature, that you might know that Torah especially contains what we ought to believe in regard to immensity. But if the doctrine of immensity, or what is without limit, is not unknown to Torah, then assuredly not else can be unknown to it. And therefore it is a false supposition of yours that there is anything of which Torah is not cognizant. Much more will nothing be unknown to him who gave Torah. Yet I cannot speak anything to you of immensity or of those things that are without limit, unless you first either accept our account of those Shamayim that are bounded by a certain limit, or else propound your own account of them. But if you cannot comprehend concerning those things that are comprehended within fixed boundaries, much more can you neither know nor learn anything concerning those that are without limit." To this Shimon answered, "It seems to me to be better to believe simply that Elohim is, and that Shamayim that we see is the only Shamayim in the whole universe." But Kepha said, "Not so, but it is proper to confess one Elohim who truly is, but that there are Shamayim, which are made by him, as also the Torah says, of which one is the higher, in which also is contained the visible firmament, and that higher Shamayim is perpetual and ageless with those who dwell in it, but that this visible sky or firmament is to be dissolved and to pass away at the end of the age, in order that Shamayim that is older and higher may appear after judgment, or after the judgment, to the devoted and the worthy." To this Shimon answered, "That these things are so as you say may appear to those who believe them, but to him who seeks for reasons of these things, it is impossible that they can be produced from Torah, especially concerning the immensity of light." Then Kepha, "Do not think that we say that these things are only to be received by belief, but also that they are to be asserted by reason. For indeed it is not safe to commit these things to bare belief without reason, since assuredly truth cannot be without reason. And therefore he who has received these things fortified by reason can never lose them, whereas he who receives them without proofs, by an assent to a simple statement of them, can neither keep them safely, nor is it certain if they are true, because he who easily believes also easily yields. But he who has sought reason for those things that he has believed and received, as though bound by chains of reason itself, can never be torn away or separated from those things that he has believed. And therefore, according as anyone is more anxious in demanding a reason or proving all things, by so much more will he be the firmer in preserving his belief." And then he goes on to say that if you can promise to show boundless light from the Torah, he would be his taught one. But we don't need to go on. The point here was Kepha teaching the same thing, that we have to believe not only that there's one Elohim, but that creation is how he said it, and that proper comprehension of creation helps us to comprehend the things that are beyond it. So just one moment. Here's the last section that we're going to cover, this yom on our going over the oneness of our Elohim, our Abba above, which again, this is all throughout the common scriptures. The Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4, Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad, right? Yahuwah, our Elohim, is one, Yahuwah. And it's a theme that's throughout the scriptures. What we're going to find here is that one actually means one. It doesn't mean 2 in 1, 3 in 1, 50 in 1, or any other innumerable things that might be contrary to a single entity, which is infinite. So, Abba willing, this will be received well and we can comprehend it correctly. I'll go ahead and read my comment beforehand as well. It says, this is an excerpt of the Syriac Clementine Recognitions and Homilies. This is the missing chapters from the Greek or Latin translation, the same chapters that were said to be utterly unintelligible by the author of that translation, which was the same people who gave us the Nicene or the Ante-Nicene writings, the 10-volume set that we have for the patriarchal writings from before the time of the Council of Nicaea. It has the recognitions in it. It also has the first epistle of Clement, the letters of virginity from him, the letters from Ignatius for his martyrdom, both the longer and the shorter versions, excuse me, as well as the corrupted versions that were known to be not accurate. All of the Gnostic Gospels, they call them, are also included, as well as Irenaeus Against Heresies. So you have a hodgepodge of truthful writings from actual believers and the overseers, and a mixture of the Gnostic things that were kind of thrown in there. When you realize the source and what was going on in the history there, it's part of the ecumenical corrupting people with the information, having them try to agree with you again. That's why a lot of that mixture was allowed. But this part in the recognitions was not translated by them. They removed 10 chapters, and you'll see why. It says, in it we will see the Father or Abba, his Ben, and the Ruach HaKodesh clearly explained and defined, absolutely refuting the pagan myths of old and now, showing that there is no Trinity, nor anything unworthy of the Father, who is without limit and contains all things. I highly encourage everyone to study this carefully and to keep in mind it too is a translation and may not be perfect. I have yet to find one that is. The only major thing that sticks out to me is calling his Ruach a her. Context is not pagan in any fashion, and we have countless examples of his chokmah or wisdom being called her and she in the old or original covenant writings, as well as the extra writings, the wisdom of Solomon or the chokmah Shalomo, Ecclesiasticus, the Proverbs. It all typifies chokmah or wisdom as a female. We also see that in Baruch and Ezra, where they see visions of the assembly, as well as the Shepard of Hermas, and she comes to him in the capacity of a female. So these things have happened, and it makes more sense when you're trying to define and determine that she's not the son. There is the use of our Mashiach calling the spirit, as it's translated in the renewed covenant writings, as a he. And that might be, I can't say for certain, but it could be because they use the Latin version. Spiritus is the Latin name for Ruach. And it, unlike Ruach, which is feminine, spiritus is masculine. And it's the only one that I know of in any language that uses the word for spirit that has a masculine connotation and not a feminine one. That might be where that comes from. but I can't say for certain. Anyways, it says, please let me know if there is anything else that seems contrary to what is written. I do not see it and believe this perfectly describes who they are in relation to one another. Aside from spelling corrections, I will strive to type it exactly as it is written in my hard copy. Please let me know if there are any typos. Shalom and ahava, or shalom and love from my family to yours. And this is chapters 1 through 11. Brother Paul, if you recall, I shared chapter 1 with you from the Greek version earlier, and this will read mostly the same, but the end is a little bit different, and you can see what they did. But right here it says chapter 1. And after Kepha arose at the time of the rooster crowing or cock crowing, immediately while still intending to awaken us, he saw that all of us were awake, for the lamp was still burning. He inquired about our well-being, saw that all of us were seated, and he began to speak. Think not that it is without difficulty for a man to speak about the truth in the presence of crowds mixed of every kind. For it is not permitted to discuss that which exists with everyone, because of those who are cunning and wicked. But it is not right for one to speak falsely because of those who love the truth. What then should one do? Who speaks the truth before crowds? He should hide it, and accordingly convince those who are worthy. But one who speaks truth to those who do not want to be delivered wrongs the one who sent him, whose words are like pearls. And if you recall, our Mashiach only spoke in parables to the people, but to those that came and inquired of him more diligently, to his taught ones, he gave the truth and explained these parables. It's the same thing that he's saying that he should do, or that any believer trying to go out and share the truth should do. That he commanded not to give them to those who assume the form of dogs and swine, for when they have taken them with wisecracks and contrivances of contemptuous words, they interpret them according to their own rubbish, so that they can take pride in the boasting of their own idiocies. Wherefore I was turning about in many matters and returning, or what we call beating around the bush, so that because they are not worthy, I could hide and conceal the el-breathed word over all authority. And after Kepha said these things, Aquila, who's the twin brother of Nesita, and both of them are the elder brothers of Clement. Aquila said to him, you have spoken rightly, but for our sake tell us the matters pertaining to the truth. And Kepha said, whatever you desire, ask it now. All right, and then Aquila said, tell of the account concerning the principality or principalities and powers, and that with which Simone has found fault, as if it were inappropriate for it to be said that the Ben of Elohim is the Mashiach, for it should not be reckoned to him to suffer things similar to plants and the rest of non-breathing things, and also of breathing beasts, talking about how you can procreate. All right. They were blaspheming our creator, saying that he was like an animal in procreation because of the way that they were describing our Mashiach came. So, and then Kepha, after seeing that all of us wanted to hear the entire account concerning these matters, committed them to us thus. The word principality is spoken over many diverse things, over both sensible, meaning what you can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell, and intelligible things. But because we should not, prior to the experience of sensible things, consider intelligible things, for we stand by, it is first seemly and appropriate for us to begin from the things that are sensible, as we have received from them whatever is manifestly true as a certainty. And this is in allusion to what Yahuchanan 3:10-12 also says, where Yahushua, speaking to Nicodemus, or Nicodemus, if you will, mentions that if you don't believe concerning the Eretz things are the things of the earth. How can you believe the Ruachni or the spiritual things that he's trying to teach? So he says, thence furthermore, we may come to the comprehension of the things that are known by comprehension. We will begin with the fact that the sun was appointed as principal to rule over the Yom, but the moon over things contrary to it. Bereshit 1:16. And the same things were appointed for them to rule by him, for from him did they also receive their existence from the beginning. He even prepared them for the Shamayim and the earth before he created in the beginning. But with them he also prepared the beasts that are upon the earth and in the sea, and the birds, trees, and herbs, and thereafter mankind, who not only began to exist, but also to live, according to the commandment of El that he has given to him. But thus it is impossible for there to be many principalities, for there is one principality and one without beginning. The things then that come after these two are accordingly in use spoken of as if even they are called principalities. But I have formerly mentioned even the cause for this step, which leads and ascends from sensible things to intelligible things, meaning you look at the sun as principle, and then you can perceive the one who made it as all-powerful, the one who gives all light, and et cetera, et cetera. Nothing is greater than the one who created it, right? But you can use what we perceive to infer what we cannot. And this is what he's saying to do, exactly like we already covered. He says, which leads and ascends from sensible things to intelligible things, so that in this way you may securely and truly become familiar, and on account of the tradition, you may securely obtain things intelligible. We say, therefore, that El is without beginning, while we studiously, without corruption, are gradually advanced and led to the one who neither is the cause of himself, nor has begotten himself, for he exists without beginning. The self-existent one who did not come into being shall bring us near to know who he is. Although he did not become a being, those who then called the self-existent one who did not come into being the father of himself and the begetter of himself dared to reject him. And they became slaves to ambitions and inferior thoughts, for they reckoned and thought it was necessary for him to beget himself, for he existed before the form of youth. They set up the non-existent in place of the existent, and they spoke as if he had come into being by means of himself. For they withdrew into madness, and to plants would liken the self-existent one who did not come into being. If you are aware, some plants can self-pollinate, right? That's the idea that they're coming to. The Greek mythology had this male-female mighty one birth itself in an egg. If you're familiar with any of that, that's the illusions of it that was perverted beforehand. It says, they were rash with the things of the Greeks, but all of them are within impiety, and it clings to them furthermore without perceptibility. For they have not known him when they say that he exists or that he does not exist. Meaning, if we sin, we've neither seen him or known him. And yes, they try to put him in a box and define him in ways that he didn't himself give the definition. That's the whole problem. We go beyond what is written and we put stuff there that isn't. It says, for by the fact that he begat himself, he would exist, but by the fact of being begotten from himself, he would not exist. He would not therefore exist because of being begotten, nor would he exist because he begat. But while he exists, the profession of the fear of El does not permit us to speak twice about him. But furthermore, even common reasonings accurately and securely drive away from us this blasphemy and grant us to speak of that which is fitting of the self-existent one who did not come into being. What therefore should a man say when asked by those who impiously say beforehand, did he not exist before he was about to become the father of himself? Is it therefore possible by means of reason for the one who has existence to be called the father of himself and the begetter of himself before he could give himself existence? But he would not exist for the fact that he pre-exists, which indeed is a sign of reckoning. It is presumption, then, to say that the self-existent one who did not come into being came into being from himself. However, it occurs to those who thus speak as if by instruction to say this: it happens to those who are drunk to jump over their own shadows instead of pits. Meaning, if you're coming to these conclusions, it's because you're drunk and not on the word. Wherefore, it is appropriate before everything to make an inquiry concerning immortal things, while expounding from the tradition of our master, where he teaches the work of mortals who are subordinated to those who are immortal. For he proclaims danger and trial until death, with the hope and expectation of the baraka of the Malkuth, or reign, wherein he said, do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the inner being, or nefesh, but fear him who is able to destroy both body and nefesh in Gehenna. Matniyahu 10:28. Amen, then, so be it then, if the inner being neither dies with the body, nor is cut off, nor suffers any of the things a body suffers, like the things that it experiences either internally or externally, small or large, healthy or sick, severed or conjoined. Although even in the generation of mankind, nothing helps the nefesh by experience unless everywhere in motion, it remains in its unchanging being. Then in diverse movement toward every affair, it directs the body. Therefore, the body experiences in its existence and in its being, in order that it may be able by experience to make examination and learn. For after nourishment of those to be born, it is sufficient for the womb, because of enlargement, that the infant who pushes and is pushed as if in struggle with the creating word and has been strengthened, hastens to come out. This then determines its hastening to come out. I just realized what this is talking about. He's giving a beautiful picture of the baby developing in the womb of his mother as our struggle in this life, our combat with the word to overcome and be born into his existence that he has for us. But let me start over again. It says, therefore, the body experiences in its existence and in its being, in order that it, the nefesh, may be able by experience to make examination and learn. For after nourishment of those to be born, it is sufficient for the womb, because of enlargement, that the infant who pushes and is pushed as if in struggle with the creating word and has been strengthened, hastens to come out. This then determines its hastening to come out. Yet this same cause transmits the passions to descendants and to the fusinity of the very form, fusinity. Sorry, I butchered that again. But when passion occurs, there is received either danger that was common or some part as much. Meaning we get the passions of existence, the will to procreate, as well as the means to do so when it's happening with us and you experience it, you're learning. Chapter 5. It says, but indeed, even everything that is subservient to the desire of women is prepared and prefigures naturally in all the stages of every man. As thus, a child is otherwise and with a different behavior than one matured, and the man then otherwise. For a child has the power of partnership with them, but does not have within his power also an agitation of the inner being. He then, who has matured, is prepared against impulsiveness, but still does not yet have use of the things he resolves. However, the man obtains by his will even a perfection of use. Meaning a child trying to do the same things a man can is going to be clumsy and fail. A man can accomplish these things because it's the way we're created. We are now able to do so. But as you're growing and learning and developing, it is not so. And it is not then possible from these things alone to speak about the immortal inner being and about the frail body, although even from them were commandments given to the self as common, as our master said. It is said to the former ones, do not commit adultery. But I say that you should not even submit to lust from sight and form. Netanyahu 5:27. And he said much, El breathe. For if the body is naturally bound to the desire of partnership of women, being then necessarily subject to those from whom it has even received its existence, and that one may have in certain behaviors that which is prior to one's own body, meaning the desire for women, right? The passions that were carried down or inherited. How, therefore, can a man think that it was said to the body, do not commit adultery? But I say that you should not even submit to lust, but not to that which is free in his inner being from the passion of such things, and has to direct and guide the body in action whither the better command instructs it, using your inner being and reason to override the passion. That very thing is gone over in great detail in 2nd Maccabees and 4th Maccabees, when it's talking about the high Kohen, or the elderly Kohen, the 7 sons and their mother, who stood for the truth and allowed reason and truth to overcome their passions, all the fear of tortures or anything else. It says, for thus, because we expect and hope for future things, we may avoid becoming angry, we may overcome rage, we may cause our mind to rise above, and as I say, not all of what we are is subservient and subject to the desire of women, but something of us is subservient by its nature, as we have shown that it is the body or the flesh, right? And then something of us is the will, which is the agitation of the immortal inner being or nephesh. Therefore, we have found that these things are thus a tobe step towards the comprehension of intelligible things, so that a man can converse with the will of El. And now we may proceed without peril, while becoming familiar with the expectation of the immortal inner being. And furthermore, now we shall not allow bodily passion to enter into the intelligible immortal being, while we distribute the complete honor to each of the intelligible things, as much as the order permits of their existence or pre-existence. So he basically wanted to set in order the difference between the bodily passions and the nephesh, or the inner being, because you don't subscribe procreation to the inner being. That is a passion of the body, not something that our Father above has. All right, so continuing here. It says, there is therefore first the self-existent one who did not come into being. For about him, even the foretellers testified, I am the first and I am the last, and apart from me, there is no Elohim. And that is Yeshayahu 44:6. The translation in the Syriac version actually said apart from me, and I was always familiar with this word being besides. So I thought it was curious, and I went and took the time to look up what besides actually means, and it literally means apart from. But we have a different connotation when we think anything besides me. We also think anything except me. And that's not the context that's ever used. And we can show that quite easily. There is no Elohim besides Yahuwah, the Father. And that is absolutely true. But Yahushua was an Elohim. Moshe was an Elohim. There's a whole bunch of idols that they call Elohims. And the judges over the people were called Elohim in the original covenant. All of these things are explained by Kef and the recognitions here. We're not really going to get into that, but the point was showing that the context is not the except. Another one is that there is no deliverer besides him, which is true because it's through him that we have Yahushua, our Mashiach. So just something to keep in mind. It's a word that means multiple things, but the context here is apart from and not except. It's the same thing when you see all translated throughout the scriptures. Quite often, the Greek has two ways it can take it, as quantitative or qualitative, meaning all is in every one of them, or all is in all kinds. So all of every kind, but not absolutely every one. And that's usually the context that it's meant by. One great example is money is the root of all evil. That's not all as in every kind of evil that ever existed, but that's the all as in all kinds of evils money has an influence in. And that is true. The other is obviously not, because Hua didn't sin for money. There's a variety of them that's never an issue. But moving on. So he says, apart from me, there is no other Elohim, while apart from me shows that he is without beginning and the self-existent one who did not come into being, speaking of our Abba. But Clement and the rest were gesturing to one another, for they wanted to hear what is the self-existent one who did not come into being. Kepha then perceived and said, it is not a little dangerous to speak and to hear about the one without beginning, but you, because of satisfaction and love of the thing said, shall fall into danger. For you are immoderately desirous, and you would even ensnare me to suffer this as it seems. For you think that I am able to discuss about the hidden one who is ineffable. I advise you, my brethren and companions, not to inquire what he is, but only to love to hear that he exists. For even to speak about him with many things is neither right nor proper. There is, therefore, the self-existent one who did not come into being, and he is honored without a common name. His name is not common, it's unique in all of creation. He is the one who is, who was, and who is to come, the one who causes it to be, the self-existent one, and all of that can be found in the literal name of Yahuwah. And if you recall, it's by the permission of our Abba that Yahushua Mashiach is able to do all things, including raising himself from the dead. It was by command of his Abba that he was able to do that. But it says, for he is without beginning, but the one who is without beginning and is the self-existent one who did not come into being is El. He did not come into being by means of generation. May he be praised as far as he alone is told, but by himself is comprehended. For it is not possible for anything to have existed before him, and anything that thereafter came into being will perceive itself by the fact that he exists and is without beginning. For the inquiry and investigation of generation, because of this, is the secret of his existing and is ineffable, as one must first consider the fact that there exists a position without inquiry. For there is no double to the fact that he exists by which one could investigate that he exists, meaning there's no one his equal to validate what he's saying. You have to believe what he said. Therefore, one who knows oneself also does not further inquire about oneself. But these things are also apart from what we said is right and proper. For it is lovely for the self-existent one who did not come into being to alone be honored in silence and quiet. Therefore, you have received this being without beginning from us, according to our power, without danger. Therefore, the El who is without beginning begat the firstborn Ben or son before all created things. Also said in Colossians 1:15. He's the firstborn of creation. As is seemly for El, while he was neither changed, nor succeeded, nor divided, nor did he emanate, which is a peculiar language that's in the Gnostic writings. Nor was he even diminished in anything. For you recall how bodily passions are things that we have even avoided ascribing to the inner being, as we have feared lest its immortality, once they had been ascribed to it, would be nullified for it. Therefore, the existing El begat and did not suffer any division, for by the fact that he wills it, his power was not found deficient for his will, nor did he go beyond his power for the object of his will, but rather equally and according to whatever he wills. Thus even does he begat by the fact that he exists and did not come into being with passivity. For if bodies that are subject to the necessity of density supply substance for shadows, increasingly much more to the self-existent power that did not come into being, should we grant that the only begotten follows after him. Now, this is an amazing thing. If you can get your mind on it, it makes comprehending all of Scripture so much easier. As a body produces a shadow, so much more the self-existent one being produced our Mashiach. And he said he only does what he sees, he only says what he hears. This is like the picture that we had mentioned before, that our Akoti, our sister Pearl, had mentioned, that it's like a hand in a glove picture, which you'll see as we go on. But on account of this, then, in truth, he is appropriately called the begotten, because in his being, he is not the Father. But I remember that Simon was complaining that we had said that the Ben of the Father is the Mashiach. And he spoke blasphemy against us, as namely, you equate men and plants with Elohim. And that was from the Recognitions, Book 2, Chapter 49. It says, hasten yourselves from your entire nephesh to learn. And then, after all of us gestures to him lovingly, Kepha said, manifest is the way of disbelief, O Aquila and you remaining others. One indeed does not truly know, and until he receives what alone is Tob in his hearing, he is afraid to believe. But when he has been empowered by the one who is able to drive the cause of disbelief out of him, he will be encouraged with the joy of this introduction, and without being asked, he will hide his disbelief of his questioning by love of desiring to learn. For there are many sicknesses of disbelief, but our discourse concerning this must come afterward, lest it lead us away in the presence of the expectation of finding belief and draw me near to inquiry before belief. Therefore, everywhere El should first be honored by us, and so that inquiry concerning him may be made known to you. Therefore, as is seemly for El, he begat his only begotten and firstborn son before all creations. Indeed, he did not bring himself to action or begat himself, for he was not awaiting impassive and inviolate, if he were in himself active. For it is impious to think such things as these about the self-existent one who did not come into being. For in danger are all the impious, as if they rightly schemed and greatly blasphemed against the self-existent one, that he is a female male. What we had mentioned earlier, like a plant that pollinates itself, right? But I recall that I have reminded you even of this, my brethren. By the fact, therefore, that he exists, El begat him, as was formerly said. Wherefore he was truly called only begotten. For it is by means of the self-existent one that he has his existence. And he was truly called the Son, or Ben, for he was begotten of the self-existent one who did not come into being. But gently and little by little, we will mitigate the injurious impudence of those who dare to divide the self-existent one with the name of mere generation, and esteem the generation that is divided in contradiction of the name with the being of the self-existent one. But it should not thus be said. If then he is called something that he is not, then he is not called what he is. For he, by the existence of his own being, for he, by the existence of his own being, it's missing something. It says, for he exists by the existence of his own being, but to be called generation dishonors him. For he would have been called something or by something that he is not, meaning to call our Abba the begetter of himself and to say that he was born in generations when he is the self-existent one is calling him something that he is not, and it's wrong. It's blasphemy. But especially as El is rational of himself and of himself without beginning, how is this not impious? It is not even possible to say that while he is the self-existent one and while he is rational, he does not also increasingly desire to correspond with himself, rather than to fall into the rank of duality. For he appointed as honorable the offspring of the unbegotten. For no one exists, and also without then knowing oneself, says, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool beneath your feet. But he did not contend against himself, such that somewhat of him would remain the self-existent one, but somewhat of him would be subject to generation. However, to say such things about El is the greatest impiety, for it is manifest, and all of them, though capable of comprehending little, profess about the self-existent one who did not come into being, that he was of himself not passive on begetting. If then after begetting they never rose up contrary to disagree while divided in number, for he is not the father of himself, how would the self-existent one in his being not have increasingly desired to remain in agreement of existence? But in generation, he was enumerated into duality. Now that might seem confusing, but he's saying if he split off a part of himself and it was never contrary or did anything that disagreed with his will, how would it not be that they would just retain themselves as one? That's what he's saying. But this foolishness is the mother of ignorance concerning El. However, her friend and sister is indocility. However, the set apart Ruach, and this is the last bit right here, but I want you to pay attention. The hand in the glove thing again. As our Mashiach only says and does what he sees and hears from our Abba, that is in all ways and in all things, including the way he created, what was made in what order, all of this stuff playing out is literally like an image of an image kind of thing. He says, however, the set apart Ruach is the pledge and guardian of the things given to us by our master, who not many Yamim or days after his ascension we received, being of the only begotten one, the seal and exact likeness of his power, just as even the only begotten and firstborn Ben before everything is the image of likeness that is exact without difference of the existing power. So just so you can see, as our Mashiach is to our Abba, so the Ruach is to our Mashiach. That's as he is the word of Elohim from the bosom of the Father. the Ruach is the very word that he speaks. The words that he speaks is Ruach in life, and what he says is. That's the picture here. That's why I was saying it's like a hand in a glove kind of thing. But let's finish here. It says, let me back up and start over. So the one that we received, who not many Yamim after his ascension we received, being of the only begotten, the seal and exact likeness of his power, just as even the only begotten and firstborn Ben before everything, is the image of likeness that is exact without difference of the existing power, which she, the Kodesh Ruach, is not, and the image alone without difference. But he provides the appearance of the self-existent one who did not come into being when he appears to both intelligible and sensible things, meaning that when our Abba wants to appear before men, he does so through his Mashiach, who is the only mediator between Elohim and man. And that's why when you go through all of the original covenant writings and you see men seeing Elohim, falling at his feet, calling him Yahuwah, worshiping him, and it's a man, that is our Mashiach before he came in the flesh, because he's always been the mediator. Even now, and you can see it through Revelation as well, we can only perceive the Father in the Ruach of our mind, and that's after you're made like the messengers. This is seen most distinctly in what's explained in the recognitions here by Kepha, and it's also seen in Revelation, but it's, I'm forgetting where it's at. If it comes to me, I'll let you know. But there's another place where it's mentioned specifically that you perceive him in the mind, and in the book of Hanok, he's taken and turned into a messenger, and he's able to perceive and see Abba. There's also the foretellers that have visions where they see both our Mashiach and our Abba, but they're not bodily there. It's in the Ruach that they witness these things. So here we go. It says, for he is not the self-existent one who did not come into being, but rather his power is entirely of the self-existent one through his existence and mightiness. And this completely shows accordingly what he is, meaning our Mashiach, which is exactly what he said. He only sees, or he only does what he sees, and he only says what he hears. Like the shadow to the body. However, to those who do not carefully inquire, the self-existent one who did not come into being has not made himself known. But for those whose inquiry is preceded by the fear of El, not only should they refuse to speak in this way, but they would also take care to meditate. For as one, therefore, is the self-existent one who did not come into being, and one is the true offspring. The Kodesh Ruach can neither be called Ben nor firstborn, but she is numbered with the Abba and the Ben as the seal of the primal glyph of the power of the two. For even the Ben or son is the power of the very Father, and his likeness is infused with his existence by equal will, as the offspring of his existence appropriately appears with him. Many things then, and even others concerning the Abba, the Ben, and the Kodesh Ruach did he explain, and he convinced all of us, and without the inferiority of visual proof, he committed the truth to the sense of our hearing. Thus all of us, after having heard, were grieved concerning how much mankind has stumbled and turned away from the truth. And wouldn't we all be if we really realize that? But Abba willing, we will, and we will correct our thinking in all things. So thank you for your time, and we will probably see you next Shabbat. You have a wonderful week. Shavua Tov, and Yahuwah be with you all.